One's ready. Go!
Welcome back to the podcast, everybody. Peaches and I are going to do the intro. But what you're going to see, first of all, I want to give a shout out to Hardy Media. We found a local studio here. It's a friend of the family. It's the father-in-law of a PJ. He has Hardy Media. I want you to go to check out hardymedia.net, or you can just email him at matthew@hardymedia.net. It's awesome. He has got Blackmagic 4K cameras. Anybody coming to Vegas, make sure you go. Hit us up if you need a place in Vegas. Man, I have the spot for you. Absolute pro. So I want to say thanks for the space. So there's a reason why. The first episode, we brought in Jay Harmon because we're like, listen, we want to have a sit-down, in-person conversation. That's the way these things go because your story's that important. This one is no different. Anthony Donahue has a great, amazing backstory of overcoming adversity from getting in a little bit of legal trouble. That's basically how he found his way into VMI. The judge told him, like, hey, as opposed to, ruining the rest of your life with this charge that I'm about to give you, you got to go to a military academy. Through VMI, he was made aware of the pre-BUDS program. He actually went to be a Navy SEAL. So he passed BUDS. He went off to the Navy SEALs. He's got a great backstory from being one of the only SEALs at the time that actually spoke Arabic, spending 2 years in the Middle East, working with Jocko's platoon, all of these things. But that wasn't enough. So he was actually an officer, and he had great time working all the way up to national missions with the SEAL delivery vehicle dudes, Team 1 out of Hawaii. Those guys are great. They've got an awesome mission set. If you don't know about that, you should listen to his stories. They're absolutely fantastic and terrifying. But that wasn't enough. He actually resigned his commission in order to become an Air Force Pararescueman. He works in the Guard and Reserve up at the Portland unit. To this day, he's got a passion for snow sports and a passion for water sports. He's a great American and a patriot. And just like great Americans and patriots, that service, even becoming a Navy SEAL, then becoming a pararescueman, that wasn't enough. And now I'm happy to announce that he is in the running. And I think I dare say that he is the front runner for the ambassador to the Philippines. So he is a fourth generation Filipino. His grandfather, great grandfather, all the way back to 1901 in the Philippines. Jeez. He comes from a military lineage. It's literally in his DNA. He's deeply connected to the Philippines, and he deeply cares about the interests of the United States of America and the Philippines working together. So Donny came on to talk about that journey, where he is in the process, and hopefully to get some name recognition out there and get the entire community behind him. Entire community, folks. I'm talking to you, every single PJ on that 1,000 PJ group chat, every single crow on your little Murder of Crows group chat, every single person that has got that silly little hat, the silly little beret. It's time to get behind your boy. When you listen to this episode, everyone in the community, this is your call to action. Share it, like, comment. It's free. It doesn't take anything. Subscribe to the channel, share it with your friends. When you see the promo come out on Instagram, share it. We're trying to do something that's good for the community and get a pararescueman to be the ambassador of the Philippines. Anthony Donahue killed this one. It was awesome to have him here in town. He stayed out of the house. I can't speak highly enough of this man. He's got a bunch of weight behind him, but this is where we get him out into the public view. So right. I hope you like this episode. Peaches, sorry I took all that one, but I was the guy that did.
You're good. You're good, because the only other thing that I wanted to bring up before we hop into the episode is head over to onesready.com. Right, it helps when you get on the right screen. Onesready.com. You hit prep. Oops, it helps when you know how to do it too. Partner discounts, and then roll down until you see attack late. Right, and you're going to see some hyperlinks in there, and anything that you want, you can go. I'm just going to do it. Because why not? Now look, what happens? Oh, you can't see it. That's wild. Because I'm not sharing it correctly. 1 second. Man, I'm bolo.
You were sharing, I saw it. You do great.
Look, so after you click on it, it created a new tab. So after you click on it, it's going to create a new tab and send you straight to Attack Elite. Look at that. Redeem your coupon code.
Bam.
Boom. There is the code. Oh, Jared. And it's a new code. It's a new code every single time. That's how you get your discount. So it's no longer through our site. You go to our site, top right, prep, partner discount, scroll down till you see Attack Elite, hit any of those links, and then it takes you here and it'll give you a promo code. All right. That's how you get your discount for anything that you need for the pipeline, whether it's BUDS, SFAS, Air Force Special Warfare, Assessment and Selection, or you just want to get better rocket fins, Alice Rucks, watches, high volume masks, all that kind of stuff. Attack Elite's where we go to.
Yeah. And it's great. Go to Attackly. It's your baseline, right? Like when you're ready to make this move, you got to invest in yourself. So invest in yourself physically, invest in yourself mentally. Make sure that you're ready to do it. And when you're ready to start really getting towards your goal, when you're really ready to start your journey to become a pararescueman, combat rescue officer, special tactics officer, TAC P, SR. Why you'd want to do that, I don't know. But all the way through Army Ranger, anything you need, go to Attackly. Use our code. We're going to get you a sweet discount. And then when you give yourself that investment, you know what you're going to find? You're going to find that you owe a return on that investment yourself.
Yep.
And it's going to be awesome. So go check out Attackly. We love those guys. We really hope you enjoyed this episode with Anthony Donahue, former Navy SEAL, current PJ, and currently leading the race to become the ambassador of the Philippines. If you guys are loving the studio, if you're loving the in-person format, man, hit us in the comments and let us know. And that was a 5-minute and 43-second preamble into the episode. So if you haven't fast forwarded, thanks. Hope you enjoy this one. Man, welcome back to the podcast, everybody. It's me. It's Aaron. It's a guy that's way outdressing me here. I'd like to introduce you to Anthony Donahue. He's a pararescueman. He's got a great backstory and something that you're really going to be interested in. As you know, we really want people, especially with GWAT experience, to start engaging in the political space. That's the whole reason why we're here. So make sure you're sticking around to hear his full move into what he's going on in his next part of life. Donny, I just want to say thanks
thanks,
much
brother.
for showing up.
Thanks for the invite.
I do want to say, if you guys are loving the production, if you guys are loving this in-person vibe that we got here, I want you to go over to email Matthew at hardymedia.net. This is the studio. We've got him producing back in the end. No audience today. We actually had an audience the last time that we were here, but go check out everything he's doing over at hardymedia.net. He's an absolute professional. He's got a full suite of options for you. I just want to say thank you, Matthew, for having us in this great space. It's absolutely outstanding. Donny, let's get into it, man.
Yes.
So you started off in the Navy. I'm not going to hold that against you. What, way back in the day when you started, when you had that call to serve, what brought you into the Navy, and then what job did you actually do?
Yeah, I would go back all the way to the why did I go into the military? So I am the 4th generation U.S. military, actually through my mom's side. So my great-grandfather in the Philippines was a Philippine scout during the U.S. constabulary mission over in the Philippines in 1901. Once he went in the military, my grandfather was born in Corregidor, which is a U.S. military base in the Philippines, obviously famous in World War II. From there, my mom immigrated to the U.S. and my dad was in the Air Force, U.S. Air Force, and I was a military brat, so it wasn't an option. It wasn't that they forced me to go in the military. Just all I knew. So I knew I was always going to go in the military. From there, I'll go into this story perhaps later, but I actually tried to enlist. Got in a little trouble.
A little good trouble.
Yeah, I got a little trouble when I was a juvenile.
You becoming a PJ makes a lot more sense now. Yeah. A little bit of good trouble behind you, that really helps in your PJ career.
Yes, yeah, exactly. So I got in a little bit of trouble, some juvenile trouble. I was in the delayed entry program and wasn't allowed to enlist. And this is something that I don't know how early I developed this love for figuring out systems, but found a loophole, and it was actually to become an officer in the military. So with the district attorney, we had a plea bargain, an off-the-table plea bargain, that I would go to Virginia Military Institute, an alumni that I got to know during my whole court process, helped me get into the VMI. I was a pretty good student. I just got with a group that liked to get in trouble. Right. And went to VMI, did kind of under the table, probation. So I would call the DA every week, and I would check in to let him know that I was still doing well at school, and I was still locked down at VMI. So Virginia Military Institute. I'm not sure if it's still that way now, but I mean, it was a prison back then.
Sure.
It had guards and everything.
Sure.
Yeah. So went there, got on a Navy scholarship, and swam there, swam at VMI, and graduated a little, I was a little older going to VMI because I got in trouble and that whole court system.
A little delay.
Yeah, a little delay.
It was a happy accident. You had that experience behind you. You understood some of the more, intricate processes. I would say that would be a net positive. We want people that work in that gray area and that understand the systems. And a little good trouble, nothing really like too bad. Like it didn't rise to a felony, so it's good. Couple calls with the DA, you're fine there.
Yeah, I honestly just that really helped me focus, and that that was a watershed moment for me, and it let me know that hey, you could go this route, or you could go another route. You have to be a little more serious, more disciplined. And VMI taught me that. It taught me that there is a meritocracy that exists in the world, and if you work hard. The things that they graded on were military bearing, which I don't know if I had much military bearing, but
at this point, probably a little resistant to authority.
Yes,
probably a little bit independent, a little bit more independent than they would like, I would assume.
Yeah, but I also knew that hey, if I wanted to get through this program, I got to follow the rules. So I did that. I did that. I got again pretty good grades at VMI. International studies, Arabic, that'll come in later. I studied Arabic at VMI, and there was a thing called mini buds. So mini buds, I don't think they have it anymore, but it was the precursor to basic underwater demolition SEAL training. I did well at that. That was my between my first classes, so between my senior and junior year. I did well with that. And got a slot to go to BUDS, and that was to become a SEAL. So, it was a pretty competitive process. Applied, again, athletics, grades, and then also military bearing is what they graded on. And that summer of 2002, I went to BUDS.
Yeah, what a crazy time too. So as you're going through your career at VMI, obviously you're there when 9/11 happens, and the flip switches, and the switch flips. Yeah. I think that's probably the third time I've done that on this podcast. I can remember time where I continue to say it. But that's completely different. Everybody of our time remembers where it is, and there you are trying to figure out your way, trying to adhere to these systems and do something bigger than yourself, and then it all becomes very real. As those towers fall. And what was the vibe like in VMI during that event?
Yeah, so as you mentioned, I was at VMI during that whole process. But actually, when the towers hit, I was at a college across the way called Washington and Lee. I forget which course I was taking, but Washington and Lee is not a military school. They're quite the opposite. It's a little bit of a rivalry, but it's more of the kind of that preppy mid-Atlantic type school. And I remember watching it going down. And by that time, I actually was studying, so I knew about Osama bin Laden. As I saw that, I was, in my head, I was like, it seems like there might be some involvement with this. But I remember how juxtaposed it was to the WNL, where I was watching it on TV and pretty much nobody really cared, honestly.
Right.
There.
Wow.
Literally across the street to VMI, totally different story.
Oh, wow.
And that's, I always knew I was in, I chose the appropriate environment, but seeing just how different, kind of the military took this news and knowing that, okay, the future has changed compared to kind of our civilian counterparts. Knowing that it was real, I wanted to go to war at that time. That's why I studied Arabic. I saw that the language, a lot of the conflicts that we kind of proxy war, that we had proxy wars with, were involved in the Middle East. And I thought, Arabic would be a good lesson or a good skill to have. Happy to serve. When I found, again, going through that process, I guess I wouldn't say excited, but with pleasure. I would go to war with pleasure.
Right. You were focused.
Yes.
Right. Your legacy, your family it must have felt like the breadcrumbs were already laid and you were finally getting to that thing. Like your all the way back in the 1900s and being a Philippine Ranger and having these things that are so inherent to you and foreign to somebody else, like sitting there at WNL and feeling completely different than the people around you. It had to feel a crystallizing moment for you that you knew where you were going to do and now you had a purpose.
Yes.
All those things behind you where a little bit of good trouble, a little bit of assimilation to a different system. And now, at least from my standpoint, that would feel like, hey, I know what path I'm on and I know what I'm going to do. So when you showed up to Bud's on the beautiful Silver Strand in Colorado, shout out to Coronado. The SEALs have done one thing correctly, and it's they put up that shop and got all of that prime real estate. Like for you guys that aren't tracking, if you go run the obstacle course, which I had the distinct benefit to do back in 2015. When you run that obstacle course, you were looking at the best prime real estate on the face of the planet. Yes. Now, I understand that your experience on that obstacle course may be a little bit different than mine because I was just doing it as a guide. They were like, oh yeah, I was a PJ and there for the platoon leaders course, and they were like, hey, if you want to come run this thing, I was like, heck yeah, I want to go run this. But as you got to Bud's, like this was real. This was no more college time. It wasn't the prep course at VMI. Like this was real. What was the feeling, kind of showing up to that first day, those first couple weeks? What were your impressions of what was going on there? Was it super serious? Was it a lot of those SEALs that were working there? They didn't have any combat experience. They were probably guessing as well.
Yeah, I would say I'm probably a lot more serious now than I was. When I was going through Bud's, I knew what I was getting into, but I didn't take myself too seriously. I think that to my advantage, going through, Bud's, Hell Week, I never really thought about, I guess I never really thought that, focused on how serious this job was going to get. Eventually later on when people started dying, then that's when it got more serious for me. But that whole process, I was pretty lax about it, and I know some of the instructors didn't like that. But in the end, I think a lot of my classmates appreciated that I kept my humor up during Hell Week.
You need those people.
Yeah.
You need, we affectionately, our friend Sam Schindler, that's, now retired doing great things. But, he said there were a bunch of different people that you need. And the clown was one of those people. Like they bring moments of levity in those time frames. And I'm sure that the instructors didn't like it. I was one of your instructors as you went through, as we fast forward to your pararescue career. But, you needed those people. Yes. And as an instructor, you might give that guy some crap and say, hey, quit fooling around all the time. But it's necessary for the team to have those moments of levity when everybody is doing surf torture and cold and wet and sandy, which is the whole deal of being on that Silver Strand, because the Pacific isn't warm from what I understand.
No, I mean, even, I went in right at the beginning of summer and it was still freezing. And I'm sure people have talked about this before, but that is the worst part of Bud's, is being cold and wet for months on end. It was never really a thought of mine to quit or anything. But I remember being like, oh my God, I would rather run 20 miles than just go into the surf for 30 seconds.
Right.
Yeah. And I mean, again, like just Bud's in general, all that stuff to help me through. It probably wasn't the best thing for it because I was an officer, kind of having that officer demeanor. Me being a little too goofy at times. But again, it was a process. It was a learning process, and I learned how to, control that, cultivate it a little bit.
Sure.
And then life takes over. Life takes over, and you start seeing, okay, this job is actually really dangerous, and you need to be serious at times. And if it means putting on a front so that you gain credibility from your men, yes, I could do that.
Yeah, and it does feel like a game sometimes.
Yeah.
Like selection, the entire thing. It feels like it's the exact people resist when you call it a game because you're like, well, games aren't serious, and
Mm-hmm.
right? But there's a way to win.
Yes.
There's a way to exploit those systems
Mm-hmm.
that you already kind of have in the back of your head. You're a systems guy, and just from our talks last night and tonight, you're seeing the way to win. You're seeing the most efficient path to get there.
Yeah.
But the games are over when you get out of that selection course and it becomes real. So what team did you go to when you graduated Buds?
Yeah, so we go through Buds, and then we had, again, I don't know what the contemporary pipeline is, but we had Buds, and then we had I think it's called JOTC, Junior Officer Training School or candidate, and then we have SEER, and actually when we were at SEER, that's when Iraq kicked off. So we actually got sent in the field a week early, which meant that we had to do 2 weeks of little to no food instead of 1 week. So we did that. I did SEAL qualification training, SQT at the time. And actually, before I completely finished, I did the Alaska phase. And before I completely finished, Captain Smithers, who was the CO of Buds at the time, he was the CO of Buds at the time. They found out that I spoke Arabic. So what that meant was, hey, get out of training, get your gear, and we're just going to kick you down range.
You are the guy. You are the guy that everybody lies to us when somebody says that they're a PJ. They're like, "Listen, man. So I was a PJ, but here's what happened: is they pulled me out of training because the CIA had this super secret mission, and I was the only one to do it. So I guess we found the one that isn't telling a lie. So, but that had to be ridiculous. Like you get pulled aside at one point, and they go, "Hey, you get your gear. You're going now."
Yeah. I felt like I was blessed. I chose the right path. I chose the right language. At the time, from memory, there were only 2 Arabic-speaking SEALs at the time, and I was the other one. I felt like I was blessed, and getting my gear on, and so that deployment, I wasn't assigned to a team, but I deployed with actually Jocko Willink's platoon, his platoon. And
well, Jocko's a big listener of the podcast. Hi, Jocko.
Okay.
Thanks for always watching. I know you're in the comment section. Thanks very much. I didn't respond to your DM this morning. I'll get to it. I know you were up early. I saw the watch. So you were actually with Jocko in some of the most formative times, and this was something that blew my mind last night. But that deployment wasn't a normal short deployment. How long did you actually spend in the Middle East?
Yeah, well, so that was Jocko's platoon as a platoon leader. So I forget exactly the timing, but maybe late 2003. So first we went to Bahrain, and then we went over to Iraq. I did some missions in Yemen as well, and then went to Iraq. And then during that time, they still needed Arabic speakers. And honestly, like my Arabic was Modern Standard Arabic. I had some time as a student. I studied at American University of Beirut and did some language training also in Morocco, but it wasn't Iraqi Arabic. So I mean, even that was a bit of a wake up call, because trying to do battlefield interrogations, coming at the end of the train, they would clear a house. I would come in and do battlefield interrogations. It was a lot of pressure. I remember Jocko messing with me sometimes. Like I would just be there sweating, trying to translate things, trying to find what the next target was, and then I would look at Jocko for support. And you got to imagine, they still they said this guy's still shitting Bud's chow. That's what they would say. And
this baby seal, you're just this adjunct that they gave you. And I mean, I can imagine, like, it took probably a long time to gain the trust of that team.
Yeah. No, they were tough. It was good. Birth by fire for sure. And again, I would be doing these battlefield interrogations, and I remember Jocko, I'd look up, hey, some kind of like support, and he would just say stuff like, hey, your helmet's on backwards. It wasn't, but the whole time I'm like, thinking like, oh God, my helmet's
Oh no! Like you were literally trying to get information that helps with the national mission, and you're worried about your helmet being on backwards. Because your platoon leader is screwing with you. That's fantastic. Kudos to Jocko.
Yeah, no, I mean, yeah.
There had to be some sort of, when you see that, when you realize that he was just screwing with you, like that's who you were as a person. Like that had to give you a little bit more like, oh, maybe I can joke around in these times.
Yeah.
Maybe I was doing the right thing.
Very appropriate, perfect timing, I must say. I had to look at it in retrospect, obviously, after everything's done. I'm like, my helmet wasn't on backwards. Why would he say that? This is a serious, I'm doing stuff, this is a serious mission.
I am fighting for my life, Jocko. You can't put me in this sort of role. Yeah.
Exactly. But no, very appropriate. And it meant, okay, being stressed out and super focused and tunnel vision is not the way to be in combat.
Right. And those lessons had to just make you better every single time, every single rep where you're able to open that soda straw up and then pick your head up from that small problem and start going, hey, wait a second, and start expanding that. That had to really just lay the groundwork for you. Like I imagine the volume got turned down on every single follow-on scenario.
Yeah, volume got turned down, the aperture opened up. So if my mission is to be very good very good at speaking Arabic, that's what I'm going to work on. So I hung out with a lot of the Arabic speaking people around the camp. I ended up staying, I think, from late 2003 to early 2007. I think I logged over 2.5 years of combat time. And so, I would be there, maybe Team 7 or maybe Black Side would rotate in there. They would go home, they would come back, and I would still be there.
They'd be like, holy crap, you're still here,
Yeah.
I had a very good friend that spent, no kidding, almost a decade in Afghanistan. Wow. So he was a contractor, he did IT work.
Yeah.
But no kidding, like there were multiple rotations through Bagram. I was like, are you still here? Mm-hmm. What is going on? Do you just live here now? Like, did you get your dual Afghani citizenship? Like, how does that work? But that's so interesting because you've made these lifelong connections with people and you've seen them in multiple times. Mm-hmm. Like I know it had to be tough for you, 4 years total and 2 years of combat time. But the experience that you had there as those people came back, I imagine you were a different person the next time.
Yes. Smiled a little less, joked around a little less. Everything. Looked at the world much differently. I did develop a stoicism,
mm-hmm.
after that time, being in the Middle East. Also, a bit jaded, probably got a little cynical as well.
Right. Well, it's a protection mechanism.
Yes.
That dark humor, that cynicism. Mm-hmm. You can't possibly engage war is terribly destructive. Humans were not meant to see war. And granted, it's woven into our culture and who we be. Wars are never going to end. We're always going to be in war. But the stresses and the things that you see in war, you can't maintain that same person. It's going to change you over a long time. And cynicism is the natural outgrowth of those things. You can't see the worst parts of humanity. Mm-hmm. And you have hope for humanity, but you have a realization. And in the context of what you were doing, of course, that cynicism protected you to some degree.
Yeah, compartmentalization was big. Trying to maintain faith. Even beyond not beyond, but both in religious sense, but even outside of religious sense, just maintaining faith in American-led international order. Mm-hmm. Why are we here? That's a whole different subject.
Right. Yeah. And we've all felt that.
Yeah.
There have been times where, no kidding, getting back from missions as a PJ that I'm like, what are we doing? Mm-hmm. What's the plan? What are we meant? What are the supposed outputs from what we were doing? And that's tough to wrestle with.
Yeah. But very reflective and again, very formidable. And I'm blessed and appreciate all those times I had. Again, that was 2.5 years. After that, I went to an undersea mobility team, so SEAL Delivery Vehicle Team 1 over in Hawaii.
Hawaii, right?
Yeah, and again, we did national missions with the undersea mobility. Very, very different than the kind of the kinetic direct operations that I was doing before or being a part of. This was very focused on special reconnaissance. When people ask me, "Oh, what does that mean?" I always say, "Hey, think of the five senses," because you can't get too into it because of the classification. But we gather intel through sight, sound, touch, feel, touch. And that's what we did. But our platform was a little SDV, a little baby submarine that we'd lock out of a big submarine.
I'll tell you, those things are cool. It's terrifying, but from what I understand, because I've never done it myself, locking out of a submarine has to be the most surreal experience, and that was just your everyday life. Like,
yes, especially going on mission, because you go on these big boomer submarines that are outfitted just for special operations, and they have to stay underwater for a certain amount of time to where any peer enemy that's trying to track your submarine, the web becomes infinite. So they can't track it after a few weeks after being underwater. So, you're spending all that time just underwater until, again, that time reaches where, okay, the infinite possibilities has reached. Now you do your mission. And very surreal because you're doing it at night. When you're in this thing,
terrifying.
You cannot see.
Monster soup. The ocean is monster soup. We say shark infested, everybody. The sharks are meant to live there. Do you know how many sharks there are in the world? Millions of sharks. Absolute millions. Just absolute terrifying to me. When we would do water work, I had a funny story where I kind of, the helicopters left us. We were talking to Jay Harmon, and the helicopters left us, and it was just my friend and I, just calm rollers, off the coast of California. Terrified.
Oh, yeah.
Terrified. I was like, I'm just going to pretend that this is just a swimming pool, and I'm just going to ignore the fact that I do not belong here. I imagine the SEAL delivery vehicle and locking out of a submarine in the deep, dark ocean had to be that to the 100th degree.
Yeah, again, beyond dark, it's you literally cannot see your hand if you do this at night in the ocean, locking out of a dry deck shelter that's what is attached to the big submarine, you're doing things by instrument. You have no idea. It's almost like you put yourself in this capsule and you fly your instruments and you appear. Appear on the place that
boy, I sure hope I'm going somewhere.
Yeah, exactly.
I guess we'll find out when we get there if we made it or not, or we're gonna die alone in the middle of the ocean.
Yeah, especially those operations, right? There's because a lot of they're national missions. You're in locations that you shouldn't be in. So this plausible deniability. There is no comms really, and there is no comms. There are methods, but for the most part, you are out there hanging it out by yourself. And, I was an officer back then, and that was, to me, that was awesome because you are truly the mission commander.
Right.
Like, you're not going to reach out to anybody else.
You can't call mom and dad.
No,
there's nobody else in a back room. People have this misconception of the military that you're constantly connected. And I can break up a million stories of, I've had commanders pinging me when I was literally on an operation. Like, give me an update. Like, I'm doing something, dude.
Yeah.
I have to do it. But really the inverse of that is that we really get into small teams of people that it's no kidding, your decision and your decision alone. As we know, the officer is always responsible for overall success or failure of a mission. And that's just the most hyperbolic example that I can have is just you and a small team completely disconnected from higher command, and you have to make those decisions in that time you have to make the best decision that benefits the most amount of the dudes, that gets the mission complete for commander's intent, guidance, and end state. Do you think that those times, even when Jocko was joking with you, did you ever have those times you're like, wait a second, I actually am set up for this. I actually do have the tools that I need to do this mission.
Oh, yeah. I was very confident. And, when we're doing our mission or planning to do our mission in the SEAL delivery vehicle teams, and I don't know if everybody's workup is the same because it's very compartmentalized. You don't even actually know what
your sister teams are doing, right? Your
next door to you.
Troops, right?
Yeah, and you'll see weird equipment. You don't even ask.
Well, right. You kind of poke your head in here. You're like, what do you get? You know what? Never.
Yeah, and we trained for an actuality of quite benign mission, right? You're doing something that you're not supposed to get caught doing, and so you have to make it very simple, and you're training for 6 months for this sortie of missions, right? It could be more than one mission, but so you're just, I mean, you get really bored actually,
Right?
you're just very repetitive day after day, and then you do contingency operations, or contingency training, which can get exciting because it's dangerous. But I was very confident going into that. And while you're on the sub, you're very mission focused.
Mm-hmm.
You've seen this area at least on paper, on computer. You know what the contingencies are. And you've worked with your team. So I was the navigator. I had a pilot. Mm-hmm. At this point, very comfortable with the pilot. You had the guys in the back that do a lot of the work once you get on target. All this to this point, very comfortable.
So 2 years in the Middle East. One of the only few, very few, like maybe as many as 2 Arabic speakers, having to constantly flex to new mission sets, having to constantly hone your skills, and then going on to a completely different, but also completely specific and really hard mission set. As you kind of got through the SEAL delivery teams, how did you end up working your way? Because spoiler alert, you're an enlisted PJ now.
Yes.
So how did that transition happen? Like, you had all this experience, first and foremost, why didn't you say it's easy to stay? It's easy to stay in the teams. You had a great service career behind you.
Yeah.
You were established in a bunch of different communities, because even in the SEAL community, which is, exponentially larger than the pararescue and the combat rescue community, you had yourself established, but you wanted to transition and do something else. So from the SEAL teams, what came next?
Yeah, so I'll go through a little bit of how I found out about the PJs. Mm-hmm. I did that undersea mobility team, then went out to the East Coast.
East Coast, Beast Coast. Yeah. People don't understand. There's a rivalry, everybody. East Coast makes men, because when you're living on the Silver Strand, when you're on those odd-numbered teams, I'll tell you what, there is. I was not aware of that little that little like colloquial sort of like rivalry. The when I went to the PLC, that was the first time I was like, oh yeah, that's cool. What do you do? They're like, oh man, SEAL Team 2. We do hard work. The East Coast makes men out of the SEALs that graduate from this soft air. Like, they didn't even like being in California. Yeah. It was this thing, and I was just like, I never had that rivalry. Like, when I obviously I worked out here in Vegas, I would never dream to look at a Moody guy and be like, Moody, you guys are soft. We actually train in the heat out here. But that's a very real thing on the SEAL teams, that rivalry.
Yeah, very real. Different culture. The benefit of being on the East Coast is you have the black side there that most of the guys, they stay there, and if they have to take a break or they choose to separate from the black side a little bit, they pass down their knowledge to a lot of the East Coast trade and sort of training detachment and the teams. So that, I think that was a huge benefit being over there. I got to do. While I was in transition, we got to do a deployment with a squadron, and there were actually 2 PJs attached to the squadron. At that point, I started thinking about, do I want to get to this point where I'm an 04, basically middle management,
right?
Where I don't want to beat that position up too hard, because it's very necessary, and you learn a lot of good, actually, corporate skills for being middle management. But at the time, I wasn't ready to be middle management. I still wanted to be out in the field. While I was in Afghanistan with the squadron, I started seeing, okay, so this eventually where there's no way I could escape this.
Right.
I'm gonna become middle management.
They're going to force you into those positions that are largely administrative. And yes, you're still leading teams, but you're leading in a completely different way.
Yes. And again, the work is hard, and you learn a ton of skills that you learn. But at that time, it wasn't for me. And there were actually 2 PJs attached to the troop. And, I was just eating, you eat lunch, eat dinner with these guys. And they were talking about, there's a unit in Portland that one of the guys there that was attached to the troop was thinking about going to. And I was like, oh, there's a PJ unit in Portland. And I was like, my parents retired, Beaverton, Oregon. And I remember distinctly he said, yeah, in Portland, if it ain't fun, they don't do it. So I'm there.
Wait a second. The siren song. You hear that? That's what it is. People always ask us, what's the difference between the Air Force or the Army or the Navy, or I'm kind of comparing these two things. Jaying it up is fun.
Yeah.
Jaying it, especially at the Portland unit, for you guys not tracking, Guard and Reserve unit, we have different Guard, Reserve, and active duty units. And typically those Guard units, those Reserve units, they get to do a lot of their own stuff. Yes. So when you look at it, and the worst thing that I always hated about every Guard or Reserve guy is they're always just so happy. Yeah. They were always there is a reason. There's absolutely a benefit to working over there. And those guys, like the morale, hey, you live there, you work with the same team, they hire you for life. And then the training, everything they do, to your point, if it ain't fun, we're not doing it.
Yes.
Hey, we can get these training I would go to the Melrose training range when I was in AFSOC. And now listen, Clovis, New Mexico is beautiful, right? I don't have anything bad to say about Cannon. But when I looked at my Guard and Reserve bros, they're like, oh yeah, we did small unit and tactics training. We just did it in Hawaii. Like, wait a second.
Yeah.
You guys went to Hawaii? Like, oh yeah, we're going to Australia to do some jungle training. I'm like, hold on. You guys are going, how did you guys make it? They're like, well, I mean, we just did it.
Yeah.
We just made it fun. So, as that seed gets planted in your head, obviously there's a disconnect here because you were an officer and you're going towards the enlisted move. So as you're kind of like closing up shop at the Navy, when did you make the decision? What was the decisive point where you're like, okay, listen, I don't want to lead in this other managerial. I want to go back to the nuts and bolts of doing the work. Did you get any resistance from that?
Yeah, there was resistance.
People had to call you crazy, right?
Crazy. Some certain people in the officer corps, they disrespected the decision, and I understand.
Sure.
There's a standard, and deviating from that, it may deviate from the officer corps. There's other things, perhaps. I don't say every officer, but a lot of officers say, oh, I'm just going to resign my commission and enlist. But very few actually ever do that.
Right.
So when an individual actually does that, perhaps, again, I'm not, maybe a little bit of conjecture, but perhaps I'm calling somebody out. But that was not my purpose to call people out. There was, leading up to this, obviously there was a lot of things. There was a few casualties that hit me pretty hard. I would say my mentor at SDV, he died. The youngest guy in our platoon died, and then my best friend, Daniel Knosson, he got his legs blown off. That's a full story. But it really, again, it just kind of got me to a point where it's just like, I kind of wanted a little bit of space from kind of that officer role of, the biggest thing was like, telling parents that they're, or being involved in this process of telling their parents that their son had died. When my buddy Dan got blown up, I was at Team 4 and I was spending a lot of time at Walter Reed during his recovery. And that didn't jive well with the team I was with, because I was spending too much time with my buddy and not with the team. Again, understood the machine's got to move on. But that left a bad taste in my mouth. I made the move. I said, okay, this is gonna force me to see my parents who retired here. This will keep me in the field. And also I had ambitions to go to CAG actually and be an assaulter eventually through the PJ route. I actually applied to CAG to be an enlisted assaulter versus like being an officer at these Tier 1 assault commands. I applied. The letter that I received back was something to the effect of, due to your age or due to your experience, you're not allowed to try out. You're not allowed to do the whole course.
Sure.
The advanced land war, or what is it? The advanced orienteering training,
Right.
whatever they call it.
I love how it's such a benign thing, and it's literally the worst thing.
Yeah.
All the tier 1 units have a very benign, very milquetoast description of it, like that you get on a rip, and you're like, oh, this seems like a good time, bro. It is not a good time.
Yeah.
It is not a good time from what I've heard. Like it sucks.
Yeah, I trained up to it. And again, unfortunately, I wasn't able, but whatever. It was, so that was my intent. Made the transition. I knew it was going to be painful. It was probably more painful. It was more painful than I imagined. Not like physical pain, but I mean, I was going to INDOC,
Right.
And
you were the worst student to have. What time did you go through INDOC?
So I was 1301, so 2000. Yeah,
we say balls one.
Yeah, balls one. Yeah, balls one. Balls one. Yeah,
that's good. 13 balls.
Yeah,
one. Good.
Yeah. So it was. So it was a fiscal year, right? So that was almost 2014.
Right, October. Well, at that time, the instructors there, like, luckily, the instructors there at that time did have some deployment experience. They did have some idea what they were talking about, too. But the absolute worst student to have is somebody that's like, no, I actually spent 2 years in Iraq. Like, you're saying that this is how it's going to be. That's actually not how it's going to be. And I can tell you for being on the ground on the SEALs. I don't know if you guys have heard of Jocko Willing, but I was sort of his interpreter translator guy. So, that's crazy. Man, I'll just ask, because everybody is going to ask in the comment section.
Okay.
How did buds compare to INDOC?
Yeah, no, it's a good question. So I always say that buds physically is a grinding pain, whereas INDOC is more, it's an acute pain based on hypoxia. So, that acute pain of wanting to breathe, and that's where the crux is of INDOC. That's where I saw it. Whereas buds, like the second phase was not as intense as INDOC's kind of pool phase, but it's just a longer grind. Like, it's hard to explain to somebody that it's very uncomfortable being cold, wet, and sandy
all the time.
So it's just
putting on cold clothes. Even in INDOC, like, we had a very, very small piece of that where, you'd get your pool session out of the way, and then you go to lunch, and then you come back for your fin or your additional stuff in the pool afterwards. And there was always that moment that I had in my head when I'm putting on this cold t-shirt. Yeah. I know what I'm about to go get into. And, we had a little bit differently. There's a difference between a summer schedule and a winter schedule. You would go do your finning in the morning, you go for this long run, and then you do this fin, and the fin is pretty benign. The fin is just like, these are the meters you have to have. This is the timing you have to have. We're just going to knock it out. You go to lunch. Those days where I was sitting outside that Skylark pool and I'm putting on cold clothes to go to WaterCon, and I know that the worst 4 hours of my life is about to happen. There were definitely some times in there that I was like, do I really want to do this? Yeah. Do I really? But I imagine buds, that's just every day.
Yeah, it is. And again, it's just the sand and the cold. And okay, people I think can imagine a week. So imagine that being stacked, not sleeping, and then still having to put on 4 months later, you're still having to put on wet clothes.
Right. And then getting yelled at because your clothes are sandy.
Yeah.
And then getting, you want to be sandy? Okay, well, the ocean is right there, my friend. You can hear the waves breaking. It's almost, it's calling you to surf every single day.
Yes. But yeah, INDOC again, much more, again, the pain was acute. And then I really looked into this, like the monotony of INDOC was different.
Oh, sure.
And the precision, and it makes sense, in medicine. So you have to get your fins, under a breath hold, completely lined up with your
just so.
Yeah.
And your mask better not be a centimeter over that foot cup, and the weight belt better be laid on it. The attention to detail, and that's a fantastic way to frame it, is it's just different because the things that you're training to do, those groundworks, we talk oftentimes about the pipeline. People don't understand why we do certain events or why we have certain numbers for things. It's because we can't induce the stress that we need to. We need to almost, just like Jocko, you probably heard Jocko's words in your head years later and I didn't understand it at the time.
Sure.
But this is what it's setting up. INDOC and the pararescue pipeline and the AFSPEC war pipeline writ large, we do things that people don't inherently understand. And sometimes if instructors can't communicate to the student, it feels like, we're just doing it. Why do I have to have my mask there? Well, no, because when you're administering a medication in a combat tactical scenario, and if you do that incorrectly, like your attention to detail has to be so high because you'll kill your patient.
Sure. Yeah. And, I had the luxury of being able to focus on stuff like that in INDOC, whereas in BUDS, I was so green.
Sure.
But, my interpretation of BUDS was there's a mission, doesn't matter how bad it sucks, complete the mission.
I'm just going to be here at the end. Put the boat on my head, the boat goes on my head. The log goes on my shoulder, I put the log on my shoulder.
And again, I didn't have the luxury of having the capacity to focus on the meaning of BUDS, whereas actually in INDOC and then, PJU, I had that experience of, okay, I understand why they're doing this. I understand why things are so monotonous, because they want you to lose focus. I mean, that's the whole point, so that this guy could be, he has a short attention span and maybe not want you, but they want to screen away from the people that can't maintain that attention span.
Well, and it's turn it on and turn it off, right?
Yes.
Like in the entire pipeline, especially at PJU, which is where we crossed paths in 2015. We want you to be able to go from a complete and total relaxed environment to you have to go 100% fully realized in your capabilities at the drop of a hat.
Yes.
We make the joke about being the one thing that the pipeline taught me how to do really, really well was change into a uniform in like 10 seconds. Because, run back to the dorms and put on your blues for a blues inspection. So you're sprinting over and then you're running back in your dress blues. And that seems like just the dumbest exercise ever. It seems like the instructor's messing with you, but that's exactly what alert is. When you're on these pararescue rotations, when I was in Iraq, we had, unfortunately, another team, a team from the Army, not the SEALs this time, killed some civilians on target. It was the fog of war. And, there was a lot of back and forth, whether these were actually civilians or were they actually combatants. And, obviously they had their own IO campaign. But that led to about 2 months of us not doing anything. We weren't allowed to go out.
Yeah.
So it was the monotony of gym, tan, laundry. At one point, the SEER guy that was attached to our special tactics team actually did a really funny thing. He put a huge smiley face over you. Usually in the air mission brief, you'd have a huge look at Iraq and you'd have all the missions that were going on. Obviously, it's a secret brief and you're task organizing a bunch of different air assets and ground assets. And we're getting a good picture of here's where things could go bad. Here's a really bad place that we need to have eyes on. There was nothing. And he just put a big smiley face up. And the room kind of went silent for a second. And you're like, oh no, the joke didn't hit. And then all of a sudden the task force commander stands up and goes, who put that smiley face up there? And immediately, like even us, like this guy was a good dude, Matt. Shout out Matty. Hi, Matt. Even us, like we all like looked at Matt because we thought we were about to get in trouble. He's like, "That's perfect. There's nothing going on, guys." Like, and he just like completely said it. But that's the life, and those are those lessons that you're teaching. Like it is hours and hours and hours of monotony and absolute, just nothing going on, spiced up by moments of sheer terror.
Yes.
And the hardest thing that you're ever going to do. Did those lessons, these things that you learned, did it ever work negatively for you when you were in the pipeline? Did you ever feel like me as a cross trainee, I was able to see through the matrix as well? Something that helped me out is, I was an instructor beforehand. I understand how instructional works. So when an instructor starts yelling at me and doing things, I was like, oh no, that's his attention step. Oh, that's an overhead question. Oh, he's literally running through the script of his AETC approved instructional thing. So for me, when I saw behind the curtain, I was like, cool. But also, I could see through the reindeer games a little bit, and I could see when we drifted and be like, oh, this is for no reason. This is because you're mad and you had a bad day, and somebody on the team did something pretty benign, and you just want to smoke us.
Yeah. Well, going into INDOC, that it made sense to me because that's a screening process. So I understood the reindeer games. Now, I remember the first 2 days of INDOC, they actually had to take me out of the pipeline because they were like, hey, you need to play the game. Because I was...
You're just not playing the game.
Well,
I've been arrested, homie. I had to call the DA at VMI. If you think your little threats are going to be like, I've been to combat, dude.
Well, this was the problem, right? There would be an INDOC instructor, a PJ, that would say something to me, and I would bow up like, and it took me a little bit to just kind of reformulate, oh, what am I doing? But that was just my automatic response.
Yeah.
Was,
well, you can't turn it off.
yeah.
I had a very close PJ friend of mine named Sean that ended up going to be a combat rescue officer. He did great work. He's retired now. Sean was a dyed-in-the-wool killer. Like, he was that guy that you wanted to be like. Like, he was a team. I trained up with him to do a task force rotation. I was a young PJ on my first one, and I looked and I was like, I want to be Sean. I want to be Charlie Echo. He was awesome. He tells a very funny story about going to his, regular Air Force officer training school. And these people, these young lieutenants with 2 ribbons on, they came over and they said something, just to get under his scanner to say something and play a role. And they basically looked at his ribbon rack, which very, very decorated, by the way. And he's like, you probably didn't even earn half of those. And Sean literally just snapped right out of it and just went into, like monkey brain mode. He's like, and he's a Southerner. He's like, hey, what the fuck did you just say to me? Like, completely lost bearing. And it was immediately that same thing. So, and it's always right. You can't train a guy to be a savage and send him out to war and then expect him not to act like a savage. And I imagine that was tough. So, spoiler alert, you ended up getting put back in training. So that's good. I hope you were able to manage that.
Yeah, no, and again, the second day, I just had to refocus and why am I here? These instructors are doing a job. It's probably pretty awkward for them as well. They didn't know actually that I used to be a SEAL at the time.
Oh, good. You kept that close hold, did you?
Well, for 5 days or something.
Sure.
Like that.
I went through with Roger Sparks. He was on my first INDOC team. So I went through 4 INDOC teams total. The first one ever is Roger Sparks, and he's this tall, lanky guy. We didn't even know until about 2 weeks later. He actually got an award. He got a Silver Star when the award came through.
Yeah.
And one of the hardest instructors out there at the time, like one of the hammers that everybody knew, like, this guy is going to eat your lunch for you.
Yeah.
He circled us all up and he read the award, and he talked about the good things that he had done as a Marine and all these other things, and he was highly decorated. We didn't even know it because Roger is a completely humble dude, and he's a stalwart for the career field and all the work that he did in Alaska and Bulldog Bite, and he's one of the legends in the career field, truly. But later in my career, I remembered that event because we had guys like you that would come through that had this service, and it's a little bit of imposter syndrome, and especially for instructors at that time, you may or may not have had a deployment, you may or may not have had a chance to go prove yourself, and spoiler alert, everybody, you get into these jobs and into these career fields, and sometimes you just miss the missions. You just miss that opportunity. Call it bad luck or call it good luck, depending on which way you're looking at it. There's some guys that are mission magnets. Everything that they do, every time they go out and they fly, you're like, how did you get in to an avalanche rescue in Afghanistan? Like, well, I was on the mission. That was it, So I imagine that has to be a hard thing, and I saw it from both ends of it. And I had the benefit of watching Roger Sparks and hearing a pararescueman that we emulated. Like, this guy, he was tough, he was typically fair, but he was serious about his business, and he really did love his craft, and I'll give him that grace. But I can't imagine how hard that had to be for him to go out there and go, hey, I'm supposed to be this guy. Like, you have this perception of me, and I'm going to tell you about a guy on your team that I could possibly fail out later that has already done the real job. Yeah. Like, that had to be tough.
It did. Again, INDOC was, eventually they found out, the chief actually, my chief of my second platoon, and he ended up calling him. I was like,
no.
What is the deal with this guy? And, my chief, we had a good relationship. He's like, oh, no, he was just tired of the officer BS. That's his line. That's what the chief of the school, the INDOC schoolhouse, relayed to me.
Okay.
I ended up getting, at the end of INDOC, honor man, whatever. But,
little flex.
Yeah. But
honor graduate.
It also...
I got a couple records, no big deal. My name's up on the board.
I guess the reason why I brought it up was like, okay, they didn't hate me, you know what I mean, if they're willing to give me that award.
Sure.
Now, PJU, different story. I went in there thinking... it was more closely aligned with SEAL qualification training, where, again, they're taking a guy who, okay, he's tough, but we're trying to train him up to the level where he could operate with more seasoned operators. Again, during my time that I was there, it was more like another screening course.
Sure.
And that, I may call it arrogance. It didn't align with what I thought the course. Yeah, that is arrogance, right? Because I'm just a new guy.
And that internal focus, and you have these perceptions, and then you break your own heart with your own expectations. So as you expect it to be one thing, and then you find it to be another, even if it's just small variances of what you expect it to be, small degrees of variances from there. You're like, hey, hold on. Hold on. Yeah.
I wanted to hone my skill, my skill set to be a PJ. And I was just like, man, these guys have our undivided attention. Like, after this, people are going to have families, you know what I mean?
Sure.
It's going to be harder to,
Yeah.
like, this is the perfect time to hone our skill set. And then, you end up playing the FF games.
Listen, I was there during that time. I can tell, like, I will say that there was a little, we call it institutional drift. Okay. Every once in a while, yes, it's supposed to be a finishing course, but if you get a team that you look at and you go, guys, you really didn't get this, so we're going to teach you this lesson again. I say that as a guy that was on a team that was terrible at PJU, and we really did need to learn a couple more lessons, right? So that it wasn't necessarily drift, it was probably needed at the time. Sure. But I will also extend you the grace to say that had to be frustrating.
It was, but yeah, I get over it and move on.
Right.
And then, you get to your team, which was Portland at the time, and then you start really refining your skills I was a reserve unit, so, we love the mountains. So you start refining your skill set to the mountains. And then also now, even back then, the Pacific Ocean. So these were kind of our two environments that we are honing our skills to. And again, looking back on it, it's, I learned stuff. I learned stuff.
Yeah. All learning is not good or beneficial. Like, just because you know a thing doesn't mean that it can actually serve you. But this fits into who you are, right? Like, you're a snow sports athlete. You go out, just in the car as we were talking. We went and crushed the gym, no big deal. He absolutely crushed it today. I was just working out. He was training, because that's the difference. But, as we were talking, and you're like, I love getting up in the morning and getting in the water, 4, 5, 6 days a week, doing some of these other wacky spots. I don't even know the tin foil something, whatever, foil surfing of some sort on the Columbia River. But, as we talked about that, you had to lean into that. That had to feel like home, where you were like, man, I'm out on the mountain. I'm getting in touch with terra firma. It's a little bit further north, but it's still the same Pacific Ocean. Yeah. And I'm still connected in that way. As you grew into yourself at the pararescue unit and in the PJ job, you that's not even like half the story, right? Like, you had good times at the Portland unit, but you engaged in a completely different set of the corporate world and pursued your education and did a lot of other stuff with that. I imagine that you started, again, with all your experience behind you see things in a different way. It's a different optic.
Yeah, I see things, but then I also realize, okay, at the core, the military is still very important to me. At this point, these skill sets, PJ skill sets or SEAL skill sets, those are secondary to, I guess, my desire or to be with a community, a military community.
It's in your DNA.
Yeah, and wanting to. I remember the last training session we had with the 304th. We were pushing out a Zodiac at the back of a 47. I don't do this all the time, so I'm a little like, okay, into the water, and I'm like, man, I don't enjoy this. Like, I don't enjoy going out of
You're telling me we've got a good boat and a good helicopter, and we're going to put them together and then do them both? That sounds dangerous.
Yeah. But
I'm wearing all this gear. It's heavy.
Yeah, it's heavy. I haven't done this in a long time, and I'm like, oh, man, Again, put on the game face. Everybody probably thought I was just, stoic and doing my thing. But in my mind, but then when we get in the water and we're all working together in this flow state, and it's just a training mission, but here's an objective. All the men in the boat are driving towards this objective. I'm like, oh, this is why
This is it.
This is it, and this is
it.
This is why I'm going to stay in until they kick me out. Honestly, it's because of that. Getting off of the treadmill of corporate. The reserves have been, great, and the men, and it's been a blessing. And you went into my corporate life. While I was at the PJ unit, you do about 3 years of activated reserves. They put you on orders.
Sure. Because you have to assimilate to that team. And, there's a whole, as we talked about it before, guys, the training is never over. Even when you get to your first team, active duty side, guard, reserve, you have a whole list of capabilities that you have to be evaluated on, and it takes some time. So typically when you get to a guard or a reserve unit, you're on those active duty orders literally to be quite literally indoctrinated into that team, into the culture, get your training done, and all that other stuff.
Yes.
So at the end of that 3 years, you were able to go to a more traditional Guard and Reserve life.
Yeah, and when you say culture, the Portland culture is very distinct, even among PJs.
They all are.
Yeah.
The identities of these units is something that, we make fun of it, right?
Sure.
Like the Alaska guys, tier 1 RQS, like we joke about, that, but those cultures are things that are important. That gives you a tribe.
Yes.
When you put that patch on, you really do feel, and of course there's little rivalries. The DM guys will talk to the Moffat guys, they'll talk to the Alaska guys, they'll talk, Cocoa Beach is its own world, with the NASA mission. But that's a benefit. That's not a good thing. That gives you, and then when you're brought into those and you get that patch and you're like, wait, I'm part of this.
Yes. And probably even more so than active duty, because guys are there their whole career.
You're hired for life.
Yeah.
They let you in, and that's the distinct difference is every 4 years in the active duty, you have to go and you have to do that process all over again. Mm-hmm. People don't understand, you may communicate in a different way. You may switch commands. Mm-hmm. I worked in 4 different commands during my military career, and commands do things differently, and there's different rules for all of them. But, the Guard and Reserve, one of the best things about it is that they're hiring you for life. When you're anointed and you get that patch and we're like, hey, you're a fully qualified guy at this unit, mm-hmm. you're never leaving that unit. Those guys on that boat left and right, like them intimately. Yes. And you see their kids grow up and you see their families evolve and you see, them evolve and they become different and better versions of themselves. Mm-hmm. And the only way that I can frame that is it's intoxicating.
Yes.
It becomes a thing that you're like, I want that.
Yeah. That's quite addictive.
It is. Absolutely. You're always chasing that next thing. So as we talk about chasing that next thing, we're going to get into kind of what we intimated before. There was an opportunity for you to serve in a completely different way, from no kidding being a military guy that was entrenched in your DNA and woven into who you are as a person, through your career as a SEAL and doing some of the national missions that you mentioned earlier, all the way through resigning your commission and getting a little resistance there. And I get it. I get, becoming an E-Dog. I have to imagine there were some officers that weren't excited about that, but E-Dogs, sled dogs for life. And then you were given the opportunity through just connections and some other things. You were given the opportunity to serve in a completely different way.
Yes. So I'll go a little bit of the backstory. Again, through my whole path, the military network has probably been the strongest, most robust, beneficial network I've ever been a part of. And, I did go to an Ivy League.
Little flex again. Yeah. I went to the Ivy League. It's not a big deal. It wasn't one of the big ones like Harvard or Yale. It was a different one. Which Ivy League school did you go to?
So I went to Harvard Med.
Oh, Harvard. It was Harvard. Yeah. My favorite story about that, there's a meme on the internet where, a guy is in a bar and basically he was like, he's on the East Coast and one of the barmaids tells him that he goes to Harvard and he pretended like he'd never heard of it.
Yeah.
And it just incensed the other guy. You know what I mean? He's like, Harvard. He's like, what is that? Was some junior college or something? And the story continues about how every single time he's just live tweeting this event. He's like, the guy came over, he's like, you've never heard of Harvard? And he's like, no, Harvard what? Like Harvard, is that a vocational school? So Harvard Med School, what in the world drove you to go to Harvard Med School?
I had this opportunity, transitioning out of the activated reserves, to use my GI Bill, great benefit. So before Harvard, I went to Oxford, did a diplomatic studies program there. So while I was there, again, the military network, and this is why I'm really stressing the military network, it's much stronger than these Ivy Leagues or even in Oxford, in my experience. But while I was at Oxford, a guy that I knew from VMI Marine, very successful entrepreneur, his name is Sean Wild. He owns a bunch of e-commerce companies. He's been trying to get me to do some change management for his companies. And I think he thought that it was a negotiation tactic when I kept on saying no. He eventually offered me so much that I couldn't say no.
That's a strong negotiation tactic.
Yeah. So
no until you get the number you want.
Yeah, and it wasn't I didn't have much desire to really get into the e-commerce business. I didn't know exactly what I was going to do. I was looking at this diplomatic studies program, maybe work in that capacity as a diplomat. So I worked for Sean, and again, became a very successful entrepreneur. He owns a bunch of media companies, and during this time, I was using my GI Bill. Went to Harvard Med. My whole purpose of going to Harvard Med was, administer quality care for veterans through medical research. So, my focus was on veterans. My research was through the Mass General Center for the Neuroscience of Psychedelics. We were looking at novel therapies for veterans using psychedelics. We're fast forward to this point where we are now, and in January, Sean, who's a big donor to the current administration, he owns MAGA.com. He plugged my name to be a candidate for the U.S. ambassador at first to Cambodia. So we have a connection to Cambodia through school as well. Part of the ruling family. The ruling families of different nations, a lot of times they'll send their kids to these military schools, and unknowingly I befriended a guy from Cambodia who's part of the ruling family. So I get these frantic calls, and I don't even have a phone. As you found out, I got rid of my phone in 2013.
This is the craziest story of all time. So now listen, in the setup for this, to give the backstory of why Donny is here is, I have a very close friend. He actually married my wife and I, my friend. What's up, Brick? What's up, RK? So he hits me up and he goes, hey, I'm not sure if you're tracking, but one of our guys, he's in this process to become an ambassador. And we'll talk about the spot that he's up for now. But as this was developing, I was like, listen, man, I have a couple fingers in a couple different pots. I would love to promote them. Obviously, part of the career field, and that's all I care about, is putting these people in positions where they can be successful, right? So I was like, yeah, man, just share me a text. My friend, my best friend in the world, goes, here's the thing, he doesn't have a phone. And I was like, that doesn't make any sense. What do you mean he doesn't have a phone? It's 2025. What do you mean? Like, give me a social media. Like, let me just DM him. And he goes, no, dude. He's like, I'll talk to him. It literally took a couple weeks. And then fast forward to last night, like, you come to the house. We had been texting. So I was like, oh, okay, cool. Well, obviously he got a burner phone or something to that effect. This gentleman carries around an iPad mini, and he just hooks up to Wi-Fi, and you just live your life raw dogging. No connection at all. Like, we grew up in a time frame. It harkened back to when I was a young man. I told this story on a different show, but you used to go out in the morning. Your parents would have no way to contact you, and you would just come in when it was dark out, and they'd be like, "What are you doing?" And I'm like, "Oh, we rode through the woods and we built a fort, and we kind of got in a little bit of trouble. We were throwing rocks at a train, and then we got chased a little bit by some cops. We got away, so no big deal. And now here I am." You're living that life in 2025 with no phone.
Loving it too. Highly recommended. Highly recommended.
So through these connections, and even without a phone, which is just the most mind-blowing thing on the face of the planet, we're the most connected. It's a supercomputer. We're the most connected that we've ever been, and you just reject that part of society, which is just fantastic to me. There's a part of me that just wants to be like that, but I just couldn't possibly. But you start having these frantic conversations via iPad and via text.
Well, yeah, again, because I don't have a phone, so it doesn't buzz, and I'm not checking, and I'm on a business trip at the JP Morgan Healthcare Conference, and it's a travel day, so I'm not gonna look at my phone, or if I don't have a phone, but look at my iPad or my computer when I can log into my voicemail. And I'm just getting all these messages like, "What the hell are you doing? You need to call me back," And, I get on the phone.
That's giving me anxiety.
Yeah.
If my phone buzzes, like, I'm so conditioned to that phone. Like, I don't, is it going to be my wife? Is it going to be somebody that needs something from work? I'm so conditioned to that phone. You saying that you had these voice messages, and then, like, I imagine they escalated. Like, hey, man, got this thing. Maybe an opportunity. Give me a call. Beep. Hey, bud,
yes.
We need to talk about this, and this is on a short timeline. And it's like, what are you doing? Call me back. Like, that made my heart rate go to 180 beats per minute. Just that alone, just that story. Like, I can't imagine.
So, 12 hours after they left the first message.
Right.
So when I say I called them back, I call them back on my laptop. So I have to set up, get Wi-Fi. And, okay, what's all this?
What an existence. You're the most interesting person. What an existence you lived on.
And so they're like, you need to submit your resume right now. There's Opportunity to become the U.S. ambassador to Cambodia.
Mm-hmm.
This would be an honor. can you sign those bylaws that we've been, anyway, I'm just like trying to go back to business.
By the way, you have a million, you have a million things that I'm requiring of you while I have you on the computer.
Yes. So I'm like, okay, I take the piss a little bit. Send them my resume. I don't know how many days later, but they said, okay, somebody, and again, this is a black hole of information. I don't get much feedback. So somebody in the administration saw my resume, and they're like, oh, you were the deputy commander in the autonomous region of Muslim Mindanao. So I did that job while I was in the Navy. So that's autonomous region of Muslim Mindanao is the southwest region of the Philippines. It's almost a separatist area. Again, we've had a presence there since 1901, off and on. We went back there after they kidnapped the Burnhams, executed them. Abu Sayyaf, which was related to Al Qaeda at the time, beheaded a few members of the Burnhams. Special ops go back in there. So I have experience it being the deputy commander there, which was maybe 10 to 20% kinetic. The rest of it was actually being a small-time politician. You have a pretty large budget, and you're trying to develop the community, find out what's going on, stabilize the community. They saw, okay, you speak Tagalog as well.
You also speak Tagalog.
I do speak Tagalog.
Do you just like dabble in Mandarin Chinese as well, or
just those two obscure languages?
Just extremely right, yeah.
And then so, in terms of geopolitically, the Philippines is higher ranked geopolitically for the U.S. So.
It's very important.
Yes.
That the entire Indo-PACOM region and in the southwest area over there is very important strategically and important to America and its interest, right?
And so I got bumped up to candidate for the U.S. ambassador to the Philippines. And, I have buddies, again, just through the military network that are now political consultants. And, they're giving me feedback. And so this is all second person. Okay, my package has been hand delivered. There's no timeline. And that's where I'm at. And again, it's not having a phone. I'm actually a very private person. But, I'd be honored to serve my country in this capacity. And if it takes being, more public, spending some social capital coin or tokens to put myself out there, I'm willing to do it for these types of positions where I'm still, I'm serving my country. I'm well suited to be in this position. Very confident, that I could do a very good job in this position.
Right. And, to me, as you're talking there, like I automatically make these connections. Like you went to VMI, even though you had a rough start, even though you had some of that good trouble behind you, all of those things led you up to where you are now. You didn't have to you didn't have to go to buds. You didn't have to go to pre-buds and absolutely just physically and emotionally devote yourself to that. Once you made it, you didn't have to go resign your commission, but you were called to serve in a different way. Once you were a pararescueman, you could just be a PJ at the 304th and have a nice quiet life and maintain that quiet persona that you like to lean into and do your snow and your water sports as you love to do. But even that wasn't enough. You're still called to serve in this capacity. And even if it means giving up a part of yourself, I would prefer to be a public person is not something that you would ever say. I would prefer to be a private person. We talked about the math equation. How much are we giving up in order to do this? But it's a testament to who you are as a person. And this whole string of events has led you to now where you're like, I would like to be a private person. But being the ambassador to the Philippines is not only something that I connect with through my family, through the history back to 1901. Literally when all this stuff kicked off, through 4 generations of military service and your connection to the Philippines, you're still called to serve your country in a way that you think you can be beneficial, and you're willing to give up parts of yourself to do it. I don't know what came first, whether that was you as a person or you were forged by your experiences in buds and then as a pararescueman, but that's the point. For you to be in this position, ready to go and ready to really help out the most that you can possibly help out, right? We talked about, being alone and probably terrified in the ocean with nobody else to help you. You were perfectly suited to do those things because you're willing to make those calls for the most good, for the most amount of people. And the ambassador to the Philippines seems like the best spot for you.
Yeah, no, I would agree.
Sounds good, right?
Yeah,
I do podcasting a lot.
I can tell. I can tell.
Yeah, you know, I can really do that. Yeah.
No, much better communicator than I am.
I don't think that's true. I don't think that's true at all.
But no, it's hard to say if this is going to be the pinnacle, right? Because I mean, I would say the missions that I did in SDB, you know, being a deputy commander at the Army, these were very important. And I don't actually know if this job would top that in terms of just what I stand for. But I mean, again, opportunity of a lifetime. And the math equation, part of me wants to just, if I do this.
Well, it's not like you can't get you can't get rid of your phone. You already don't have a phone. It's not like you can disconnect from social media. Like
they'll probably require me to have a phone. So they'll give me a phone, I'm sure. You know, this also means less time surfing, less time doing snow sports, but
less time with that young family.
Yeah, young
it's
family.
It's all part of the equation.
Yeah, but it's you know, I try to put forcing mechanisms on myself to transcend the self, because I always think the default is kind of to be like, right, what they call it, self-preservation is kind of the default.
Sure.
So you actually have to put these forcing mechanisms, at least I do, to make sure that I place the community above myself. And that really is it. You know, if this opportunity that I was not pursuing, you know, is presented to me, this is a forcing mechanism. Okay, are you going to place the community above yourself? If you don't, then I'm misaligned. There's a misalignment if I don't pursue these opportunities where, again, public service opportunities.
Donny, that feels like a great place to end it, brother.
All right, brother.
I wish you all the luck. I hope that this black hole of information becomes an immediate feedback. I hope that the very next thing that you get on that iPad, which is just the wackiest thing, I hope that, you know, hours later, you're alerted that you've actually been appointed to be the ambassador of the Philippines. For everybody that's out there, and I'm talking to you directly, community, the pararescue community typically does a bad job. We talked about it a little bit last night. Yes. It does a bad job with supporting our brothers in these endeavors. So this is a call to action. Get this podcast in front of Susie Wiles. Share it to everybody you know. Say nice things about Donny and mean things about me in the comment section. I want to get Mac's eyes on this, because if there was a right candidate for this job, it's Anthony Donahue, prior Navy SEAL, connected to the Philippines through a legacy of military service. It's literally in his DNA, and he's the right person. So let's get him there. Donny, thanks again, brother.
Sure,
love it. Follow us everywhere we are. Shout out again, Matthew Hardy. Hardy Media. Go check him out everywhere he is. We appreciate you. We'll see you next time.